me try this recording. Okay, so welcome to this October meeting of the Active Poets Society. This is the poetry club hosted through the American Corner here in Tunis. For those of you who don't know, the American Corner is an American Cultural Center and an English language library. So on one hand, we have book borrowing services, laptop borrowing, and we're a general study space where people can freely come and work. And we also have cultural programming focused on American society and culture and cultural exchange between Americans and Tunisians. My name is Sophia.
Cool.
I'm the coordinator here, and I'll give it over to Tyler, Tyler Miller, who is our host of our poetry club.
Cool, thanks Sophia. It's so nice to have a platform like that and to be hosting this poetry workshop and to have hosted the other workshops. I found it really beneficial for myself and other friends who were inspired to write their own poems and to even perform their own poems last year in December of 2019. And now we have a little bit of a different format, but I do have one of the results of our last poetry workshop here. So just show kind of a little bit. I know you can't read it there, but I thought maybe some of the folks from the last poetry workshop would be interested in seeing a flash peek here until I can get everybody a copy. But you know, there's art and images of Tunisia, and I do want to create another poetry zine like this, you know, sometime soon. I know the corona has changed everything here for us, but you know, over time we'll get there again. So I guess, yeah, maybe I'll just go into the poetry workshop and we can just kick it off like that. So, okay, my goal is to like develop a appreciation for poetry, you know, maybe explain what poetry is to me and why I've been interested in it for a while, as like one aspect, you know, an explanation of poetry, but like my true goal is to inspire everybody to write more poetry, or at least, you know, creative writing. And creative writing does have a tendency to turn into poetry if we structure it in the right way. But every poetry workshop kind of starts off with the same sentence, and then we go into the sentence and kind of pick it apart. We have each section that we describe, and it creates like an understanding of poetry. So that sentence is this: poetry is the art of creatively combining words and phrases in order to express ideas, emotions, and natural occurrences which inspire the emotional imagination of the reader. So there's a lot in that sentence. So that's why we have a lot to talk about when it comes to poetry. So let's see here. This is also my first Skype interaction. So yeah, just bear with me and feel free, you guys, to really chime in at any time if you have a question or anything like that. And oh, let me give my email at the beginning here, so that way, if you want maybe like my notes or something like that, you can email me. My email is mumpoetry@gmail.com. So it's mumpoetry@gmail.com. Hey, Senda, how are you? Still connecting, but yeah, we're having more people join in. So let's see here. Nice. There's a note there. And
I just wrote your email in the chat in case anyone needed to see it.
Great, thank you. And then I'll post that introduction sentence. We're still on the introductory sentence, so good timing for everybody who's joining. Poetry is the art of creatively combining words and phrases in order to express ideas, emotions, and natural occurrences in order to inspire the emotional imagination of the reader. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with, poetry is art, right? And so poetry allows us to change the rules of like a short story that we would normally tell, or even any sentence structure that we would usually think of using in, typical English or any other language. And the reason that we're able to, and the reason why we would want to change the language structure of a sentence is to describe something that is, deeper, it's more complex, and at the same time, it sticks in the reader's mind. So it's the most emotional topics, it's the deepest topics, and we're trying to inspire the reader's imagination. So when we do this through poetry, I like to encourage people to speak directly to the reader. Okay, so we think of these words and phrases, the ones that are interesting to us, we use them kind of like tools in our toolbox, and then we bring them together so we speak directly to the reader. So the goal isn't really to be necessarily abstract in each word or phrase that we use. The goal oftentimes is actually to be quite simple. In my sort of experience, I should mention that some of these things that I talk about are kind of my experience and in my opinion, and other poets maybe will break the rules because, poetry is after all art. But I think that this style of poetry is very effective. So that's why I like it. And okay, so let's start with, poetry is art. We're changing the rules of, your typical grammar and English. And the reason is that we're trying to create like an imagination for the reader. And we're trying to actually inspire like the emotion of the reader. So we're like conveying something, like I love you, right? But we can't just say I love you. I mean, we could, but to be poetry, we have to kind of play with it and have fun with the words, and think of like a new way to say I love you. And we are always, as poets, listening to different phrases and words that we hear, whether that's on TV, in life, the radio, things like that. We're always listening for words and little phrases, little cute things that we think can maybe match with something else. And we are creating like a rhythm, and the rhythm does help the imagination of the reader or the listener. So we're using all sorts of tools to create this emotional imagination. Okay. So I have an example of one of these unique phrases that when I first started writing poetry, it kind of stuck out to me. There's a radio station, they're associated with NPR or BBC, and they have a show that's called The World. Okay, so the name of the show is just The World. Okay, and I heard the guy on the radio say, the world begins in 20 minutes. Okay, and he was talking about the show that was going to start in 20 minutes. And I thought, like, I need to use this in a poem because, I mean, it's just an amazing concept of the world beginning, and it's a very big concept. So poets often use large concepts in order to create that image that sticks in the reader's mind and to make the emotional connection really deep. So we're always looking for these sayings that maybe we can use in life. Sometimes it's maybe half of a sentence, half of a phrase. At some point, maybe later, we'll talk about words and idioms and little phrases in all different languages that we hear that can often be used in poetry. So let me dive a little bit into some of the more traditional tools for poetry, because, you know, I guess like I have my own way of finding the like important phrases and the important words, but you know, some of the classic devices for poetry can help us. So the first device that we'll talk about that we can use is alliteration. And alliteration really helps create like a good rhythm for the words. So the rhythm can often help create like a good image and a memory and to make the poem memorable. Okay, so we can use alliteration to create more of a something that somebody might remember, or they might you know, take that one little piece and it really like hits them in, you know, in their center, in their core. Okay, so alliteration. A couple of examples here. Wait, let me tell you what it is. I mean, I'm sure you know, but with alliteration, we're repeating nearby sounds, you know, sounds that are close by each other in a sentence. Okay, so a couple of examples. Hey, Senda, can you hear us okay? Okay, hey, good, okay. So, alliteration. A good cook could cook as much cookies as a good cook who could cook cookies. So it's an extreme example, but you know, all the creates a rhythm, okay? Black bug bit a big black bear. Sheep should sleep in a shed. Okay, so there's a rhythm there with alliteration. It's really fun. And with all the tools, you know, you can use the tools or you cannot use the tools. You can use the tools at different times. And you're trying to create I usually have my board where I can draw things, but you can create like a sort of rhythm, and then you can make a word that just kind of sticks, and you try to find those interesting words that stick and that change the rhythm. You can change the rhythm in different ways, and you want to make something kind of memorable. You use the rhythm, and then you can stop the rhythm. Anyway, let me go on to the next one. So this one's assonance, vowel repetition. So we kind of repeat more in the middle of the word. Try to light the fire. I'm reminded to line the lid of my eye. So that kind of like, try to light the fire. I'm reminded to line the lid of my eye. So these are quick little examples, and by the way, after this we'll dive into some full poems. So we'll get through the examples and then we'll get into some actual poems here. We have imagery, where we just are talking about the images directly. So we have like, you know, the image of taste. We can use taste as we describe something. The familiar tang of his grandmother's cranberry sauce reminded him of his youth. Sound, The concert was so loud that her ears rang for days after. Sight. The sunset was the most gorgeous they'd ever seen. The clouds were edged with pink and gold. So imagery is really just kind of describing, and it really is kind of that poetic essence. The metaphor where we compare two related things, the snow is a white blanket. He is a shining star. Her long hair was flowing. Her long hair was a flowing golden river. Okay, and then we have onomatopoeia, where words imitate the sound. So we have slam, spat, slam, splash, bam, babble, warble, gurgle, mumble, and belch. So I guess these are probably like considered slang words in a way, but sometimes they can be fun, you know. If you use really complicated words throughout your rhythm, really complicated sentences, sometimes you can end it with one word. So it's a full rhythm here, and then bam or wow, cha, you know, one word, and it kind of creates an expression, like a loud expression. The words almost can act as the punctuation in poetry. So you can imagine your reader, you can make your reader go fast or slow based on the words and the way that you place words, you know, because poetry is this art, and we're free from the usual rules of language. So another tool here we have is personification. This is where objects are doing the things that people usually do. The lightning danced across the sky. The lightning danced, okay? The wind howled in the night, okay? So, you know, these are things that, you know, the wind doesn't usually do that. The lightning doesn't usually dance, but sometimes you see it and it kind of looks like it's dancing. So the poet describes this and then describes something else and creates the full poem. So we have a refrain in poetry as well. A refrain is really common in poetry. You can start a kind of rhyme at one part of the poem and then go away from the rhyme and then bring back the rhyme later, and that's called the refrain. But just like a simple one, side by side, would be, come on, honey, come with me. So come on, come, kind of like that is a refrain where you come back to the same kind of sound of the word. And then we have just your traditional rhymes. You know, rhyming is the echo. One thing that I wanted to talk about, the way that I look at poetry, like I said, any of these tools can be used at any given time. So a poem doesn't necessarily need to rhyme or doesn't need to rhyme in the traditional way. And it can actually help if the poem maybe rhymes for a little while and then doesn't rhyme for a section, because that creates the reader to kind of pause on each section and to have it become more meaningful, possibly, to the reader. So a couple of examples of a rhyme would be, turn your frown upside down and smile. So frown and upside down. And then the night is so nice and so am I. So a couple of examples there of tools. And like I said, you can use any tool that you would like, and you don't necessarily have to use any given tool. I think that the most important thing that we want to do is convey some kind of meaning, something that means something to you, and then how do you say it in a way that would also mean something to somebody else? It can be, sometimes it's, you know, it causes you to think a lot, but that's why we kind of practice and we write down maybe words that we hear, little phrases. Trust me, you know, take notes. throughout the day, and then you can turn it into a poem possibly later. All right, does anybody have any question? I will send the notes to anybody who would like. If anybody has anything they would like to say, any input, just let me know. And then I'll go on to the next part and read a couple of poems. Okay. So, this one here, we will start with a couple of poets that some of the poets from the last Active Poets Society meeting are familiar with. We have Franz and James Wright. I used new poems this time, so these might be new to everybody. But a little interesting background is that James Wright is the father of Franz Wright. And James Wright was a poet, and Franz Wright was a poet. And both of them, they're the only father-son pair to win a very big reward called the Pulitzer Prize for poetry. So they both won Pulitzer Prizes, and they both wrote poems in the late 1900s. And we'll start with James Wright, okay? So this one's called Beginning. The moon drops 1 or 2 feathers into the fields. The dark wheat listens. Be still. Now, there they are, the moon's young, trying their wings. Between trees, a slender woman lifts up the lovely shadow of her face. And now she steps into the air. Now she is gone, wholly into the air. I stand alone by an elder tree. I do not dare to breathe or move. I listen. The wheat leans back toward its own darkness, and I lean toward mine. So that was Beginning by James Wright, and this is where usually everybody would be talking about their favorite part and things like that. So do feel free to chime in. But let me drop this one in the chat because that might be cool to see it, because he uses an interesting line structure. So another thing that's in your toolkit as a poet is how the lines are organized and where the words are. So you create kind of that, you can guide the reader, hopefully, into a certain flow. To make it have a rhythm, but to also make it kind of stick in the mind, if that makes sense. We're kind of balancing those two things between rhythm and then connecting. So, Beginning. By James Wright. Okay. So they're always playing with these imaginative things, the thing that is beyond the current moment. I know a lot of poets will write about, California, or, they use names of things and things like that, which, to them it meant a lot. But then I say, what if you've never been to California? So I try to encourage people when they write poetry to try to avoid saying the name of the place. Challenge yourself just to describe it. Describe what it is, where it is, connect to the reader in a way that is more global and universal. So that's my opinion on some of these things. But we'll go ahead and read this poem here by Epitaph. It's called Epitaph by Franz Wright. Okay, Epitaph. Now, I'm not the brightest knife in the drawer, but I know a couple things about this life. Poverty, silence, impermanence, discipline, and mystery. The world is not illusory, we are. From crimson thread to toe tag, if you are not disturbed, there is something seriously wrong with you. I'm sorry, and I know who I am. I'll be a voice coming from nowhere, inside, be glad for me. So, you know, Franz Wright's always trying to play with the most epic, amazing things, kind of about, you know, spirituality even, you know, he talks about poverty, you know, the imagining of like not having anything, but then he puts on the end of it kind of like a very like adorable connection to the reader, where he says like, be glad for me, you know, like I know about all of these things, I've experienced all of these things, but like I'm still very like happy. So he's trying to connect to like every person, right? So that's why I chose that one. Let me post it in the chat.
Tyler, Chalky said that he has a question for you. So you can go ahead whenever you like. Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm sorry I joined in late, but
Yeah.
I'm usually under the impression that poetry is like about rhyming, but
Right.
the two poems that you have read so far, it feels like they're just speaking like what they have in mind, like their thoughts, their inner emotions, and so on. It doesn't have like a rhyme to it. Is that like how it's supposed to be? I don't know.
Yeah, thanks. So with all the tools, you can use rhyming to some degree, but sort of one of the goals, I think, with some of these poets is to create kind of a rhythm that almost sounds like a rhyme, but it's not quite a rhyme. So they're creating maybe a different rhythm with the poems. But a poem can totally rhyme, but I think within kind of, you know, the more recent time frame of things, people have been trying to experiment more with less rhyming, if that makes sense, or to rhyme for a certain period of time. But if for instance a poem just rhymes the entire time, maybe sometimes it can kind of turn into a song, and you can maybe almost become too relaxed with it. It just kind of cradles you too much. So for me, I do like to rhyme frequently, but I also think that like the more important thing is connecting to the reader and making it stand out. So I think a lot of the poems, maybe they're using some of the other tactics that we talked about a little bit earlier. And that's one reason why you know, the toolkit is larger than just rhyming, right? So there's like a lot of tools we could use. Let me just list them for you. You know, alliteration, which is repeating nearby sounds. It doesn't necessarily have to rhyme, but you know, a good cook could cook. You know, like that kind of like that kind of thing is not necessarily it doesn't have to be a rhyme, but it kind of creates like a rhythm. So the goal, I think one of the goals is to create a rhythm of imagination. So it doesn't necessarily have to rhyme. And we have, okay, the second one is assonance, vowel repetition. Try to light the fire. You know, some of those do rhyme, but it's more about like kind of the sound of each letter. Okay, so those two I think are kind of ones that don't necessarily have to rhyme, but they're still within the realm of poetry. And you know, the ultimate goal is to inspire the reader. So, you know, we don't necessarily have to rhyme. We definitely probably should not rhyme all the time, and we can rhyme for a little while and then maybe stop it, you know, and then just like ask the reader, you know, what do you think about this? Or I felt this way, very directly. So I like this idea of rhyming and then not rhyming. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then I found this one interesting. I found it today. The poet's name is Ira Goga, and it's called The Kitchen Indexed. And in this poem, a part of it, he is just finding the things around him in the kitchen, and he describes them in like a unique way. So I like that part of poetry. We see things just in our environment, like I said, natural occurrences, but then we describe it in a rhythmic but unique way in order to make somebody say like, like that must have been really interesting. And so Ira here is just describing his kitchen in a unique way, the way that he sees it. And you know, listen also for the rhythm. He uses some interesting rhythms here, and some rhyme, but you know, the 2020 poets are rhyming a little bit less than you know, Shakespeare. So, The Kitchen Index by Ira Goga. A glass knife, a candle, chamomile, a handsaw, a hand towel, a Sharpie container, stones that may or may not be hollow, holding crystals, ceramic tributes to the moon, a no-kill mouse trap, carnations, carnal studies, blue thread to make stitches, matches to be struck. I wanted to understand form, the beginning of things. I deconstructed. I stopped a clock, pulled its hands from its hard face. I undressed beneath the incandescent overhead. I couldn't name myself, but I renamed myself in a bowl. Strawberries thawed in their own wet red. I couldn't think too hard, which worried me, because there was no answer I wanted. To be a man, to be a tree, or something less, like a plank. What I saw, I pinned down. I listed what I knew to be true. Road salt in an open dish, an hourglass full of pink sand, a ruler. Assuming what I saw was honest. The name? It means watchful. Later, I found in Latin, wrath. Oops. It is my duty, dear reader, to never look away. Yeah, that was The Kitchen Indexed by Ira Goga.
It's an amazing poem, actually.
Ah, I really like it. I'm glad you like it, Shab.
Yeah, it's Shab.
Shab?
No, I'm not the Shab.
Shab?
Shab means the people. It's Shuaib, I'm sorry.
Ah, wait, your name is Shami?
It's Shuaib.
Shuaib.
Yes.
Shuaib. Okay, thanks. Sorry. Yeah, you know, and that just reminds me, sometimes even linguistic differences are good tools. But I meant to post the poem before reading it. I think it's really nice to read the poem while reading it out loud or listening to it. That's one piece of advice that I have. When you read a poem, I really encourage you, if at all possible, to read it out loud. I'm a big fan of reading out loud in general. But that's one thing that actually got me into poetry. At first, I didn't really understand it. Then I was reading poetry out loud, and all of a sudden, just with the imagery and the rhythm and everything like that, I was like, oh wow, it's just really powerful. You know, so the goal is to create powerful words, powerful combinations of words, and to make great phrases. So now that I posted it, I almost want to read it again. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I said I have a question regarding this poem. Is the writer here trying to find themselves in the objects, or like are the objects and their
Yes.
position like a reflection of their status?
Yes, yes. I think in a really abstract way, they are trying to find themselves within the kitchen, within everything that is spread around, and trying to create their own meaning and to express their own existence within a lot of random things. But as the rhythm builds and as they create more honesty for themselves, they build an entire story, you know. So in a way, poetry is creating a story about your life, and making meaning about your life and everything that is directly around you, and then to maybe describe it to somebody else in a way that creates meaning for them. But you know, when I first started reading poems, sometimes it would be just one little line, you know, like that line I talked about the world beginning in 20 minutes. Just like a line like that. Sometimes I would just read a poem and I wouldn't really know what they were talking about the entire time. But then there was one line that would just make me feel emotional, and it stayed with me. And so I think when you read poems, you know, at least just try to find like the one line, or to, you know, think about the possibility that just one line could be the only thing that makes reading the poem worth it. You might not know anything about, you know, sometimes when they try to create a large story and a large, something that's large and deep at the same time, we can get lost, and language is complicated and it's difficult. But that's why I try to make my poems ones that people want to read over and over again, because sometimes you find like the new meaning. Even this one, when I read it earlier, this is my first time reading this poem. And when I read it earlier, there was less meaning to me than reading it the second time.
If I may
So,
interject here.
yeah.
This poem, it feels like the writer was kind of selective of what he was choosing to describe in his kitchen, like a match to be struck and a thread to saw the wound, and an hourglass, meaning that time is going. And it
Yeah.
feels like she or he, whatever, is describing himself. And like, even though the kitchen has so many tools, the only things that he sees are what relates to him or her, you know?
Right. Yes, exactly. It's that kind of description of the individual, you know, the individual, you know, they see these things around them, and they're describing each one in a different way, you know, and then at the end of each of these descriptions, maybe it creates like a whole, you know. So it's this everything around me, and then how do my insides what is it expressing about my individuality and my insides? And then it, you know, each path and each line goes in a different direction, and hopefully meaning is created at the end of that, you know, whole process. So do you guys have any more thoughts on that poem at all? Cool. All right. So let's continue, because I do want to do just a couple minutes of free writing. You know what? We have a little bit of time and we don't need to do that much free writing today. So now that we have that poem in the chat, I'll just read it again. Okay. So this is The Kitchen Indexed by Ira Goga. A glass knife, a candle, chamomile, a handsaw, a hand towel, a Sharpie container, stones that may or may not be hollow, holding crystals, ceramic tributes to the moon, a no-kill mousetrap, carnations, carnal studies, blue thread to make stitches, matches to be struck. I wanted to understand form. The beginning of things I deconstructed. I stopped a clock, hold its hands from its hard face. I undressed beneath the incandescent overhead. I couldn't name myself, but I renamed myself. In a bowl, strawberries thawed in their own wet red. I couldn't think too hard, which worried me, because there was no answer I wanted. To be a man, to be a tree, or something else, like a plank. What I saw, I pinned down. I listed what I knew to be true. Road salt in an open dish, an hourglass full of pink sand, a ruler. Assuming what I saw was honest. The name? It means watchful. Later I found in Latin, wrath. Oops. It's my duty, dear reader, to never look away. Cool. There is a line there where he kind of changes. He's describing everything. If we start at carnations, we have carnations, carnal studies, blue thread to make stitches, matches to be struck. I wanted to understand form, the beginning of things. So where he switches after matches to be struck, I wanted to understand form. That is a real switch from describing everything in the room. Then all of a sudden he's understanding his own self and what he wanted in life and what maybe even why he's describing everything around him. So it's these kind of these moments where he's describing everything around him and then he switches and he describes his own emotions and it's a total transition that really kind of, in my mind, makes it powerfully stick. So great. Okay. And like I said, I could send you guys the notes for today also. So as promised here, I have one of my own poems, as some of you guys asked for. And like, it's really dreamy. I like to write about dreamy things. And, you know, like I said, I like to make the poems universal, but I do like to play a bit as well. I just want to say plasticine is like a color that I find interesting. So I will read this one. It's called Wander Lustica. drooping pedestal, seeming daisy, plasticine red and purple, green light, tossle, softening, and subtle, lightning, logarithm, melting, freedom, burden, on fire, valuables, optional, curtain, imparting rain, sparks, sear, flying to flowers, into the wind, air to sustain, Margellin, curtains in haze, Technicolor, tapioca, all melting away. Cool. I thought the applause would be louder. Just kidding. Just kidding. So yeah, we have about 10 minutes, I believe. So let's go ahead and do free writing. I forgot to mention, if you have like a pen and a paper, cool. If not, use your phone or like a computer. And so, like, let me just inspire you, you know, as a poet or as somebody who wants to write poetry, take note of words that you hear, because you forget, like, especially if you try to write a lot, you forget a lot of things. So, you know, always write, and just always don't be afraid to put something on paper, even if it means nothing. Just tell yourself, and by the way, with this, nobody will see it right now, right? So sometimes we do a writing exercise if we're in person where we share what we write, but right now, nobody's gonna see it. So just go ahead and write whatever you would like. And then during the time frame, I might just say random words that might inspire something. But again, nobody's gonna see it. So let's do a couple minutes of free write and then keep writing as I say a couple of words. Just continue writing. It can be anything that's in your area. I see a book, I'm at the desk, and then we'll go about 4 minutes. Okay, so it's not that long, and maybe even try to write fast. Guys, we're not writing a poem, okay? We'll work on the poetic part later. Just try to think of interesting words, something you heard today, just fast and, you know, breathe, okay? So 3, 2, 1, 4 minutes, go. Bubble. Moon. Mystery. Life. So usually you get to a point where you're tired of writing. Uh, just you don't think you have anything else to say. Push a little bit more. You know, just try to get the brain to say something. Homework. Cat. All right. So cool.
Right.
Anybody? Huh?
Yeah. Okay. So I would like to say that I'm kind of cheating because I have something already made. I do.
Ah,
No, I do write articles from time to time. It's like my thoughts put into words. And if that's, it's not poetry per se, but I try to do play with words and try to make it sound elegant and also talk about what goes on in my head. And yeah, just when I have so much going on in my head, I want to put it down in words, you know?
mhm.
And I can share it if that's okay.
Sure. Is
Uh,
it, we have to go soon,
oh,
but
oh, it's a
would you like
2 minute
just a
read.
minute?
It's a 2 minute read, but it's
Go
okay.
ahead, go ahead.
I'll put it in. All right. 1 second. This article is called "Who Are We?" All right. So it starts. Life is such a fickle thing. It's a roller coaster of emotions. Every day, a new adventure. It puts you in unexpected situations. It makes you wonder and ponder over its meaning and our purpose in it. Every day I pass by hundreds of people and I wonder what are they thinking about? What makes them wake up every day and what motivates them? I'm sure everyone has a riveting story to tell about what did and what will happen to them. And I would be glad to sit down and hear them tell it, to put myself in their shoes and let them either inspire me to work harder or be more thankful for what I have. Everyone has a different way of dealing with the ups and downs of life. Some go with the flow and don't give a second thought. Those are the lucky ones. They're the ones that we should surround ourselves with. They are a ray of sunshine. They smile all the time. Even when push comes to shove, they can easily deal with it. They are content with what they have and don't regret what they did. They're just that strong. And then there are those who stumble and fall on every bump on the road. They are bruised and hurt. They're the ones that care too much. They seek perfection. They have unrealistic expectations. They want everything to be perfectly neat and in order. And if anything doesn't go according to plan, they panic. And it's like the world has gone into ruins. Their mind can't handle the chaos. They live in constant fear of the unknown. And even though they struggle a lot, they come back up 10 times stronger. They learn from their mistakes. They're the ones that are the most satisfied in life because they know that they did everything in their power and more to accomplish what they set out to achieve. They are fighters. I am sure of my few readers can relate with either one of those two categories of people. You are either strong or you are a fighter, or you are both. That's it.
Cool. Good job. Thanks for sharing.
I don't know. There's still a little bit more to it, but I didn't want to like you have to go, so it's okay.
I appreciate it. Send it to me, guys. My email is in the chat. It's mumpoetry@gmail.com. My Facebook is Tyler Miller Poet. I'll put that in the chat real quick. Feel free to send me a request if we're not already friends.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was so good to hear. I love hearing people share
Okay.
what they've written before and also during pre-writing.
Nice.
Thank
Cool.
you.
All right. Well, thanks for coming, guys. Like I said, feel free to message me on Facebook, email me. If you have any last second question, let me know. Otherwise, Sophia, if you have anything, let us know also here.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting this, Tyler, and thanks to those of you who came. We're hoping to do this more often. I know we had so much interest, so it'll be good to find a good time that works for the people who are interested and hopefully keep this going.
Cool. I'm excited. Let's stay focused and we'll do it again.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, have a great evening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.